What would you say are the real key steps or the key things along the way that really contributed to growth?
I believe that if you really see a problem that's out there, and I always think broadly about this, it can be really in any industry, don't assume that someone else has thought about that same problem. More and more consumers look for brands that, are authentic, are, where there's somebody behind the brand. And I think that gone are the days where you can just go launch first of all, I don't think you can go launch a drink brand today or even a food brand that doesn't taste good, at least to the majority of the population. It has to have, I always joke about Red Bull. I don't think if Red Bull launched today, I don't think it would actually be successful. It's not to say that if you were a drink of the past, that you can't build that brand up and get people, hooked on your brand or whatever. But I think that today consumers look, and this is partly because of the media, right? They look for brands that they can actually talk about, right? It's not, when Chobani launched as an example, it got on the shelf, it had great packaging, but you actually want to know, what's their story? And maybe you don't know the story the first time that you try the product, but you want to know the story behind these brands. And so I think that it is, a failure for a product if you don't actually talk. If you do not have the ability and the story of your why to actually go and talk about, what the situation is and why you ultimately did it. And I think it can be frankly in any industry. Look, we all see problems and that's why we decide, gosh, I should just go do this. I should go start a company around it. I should just go launch this product. And I think that's the most important piece. And then you fall in love with the brand even more. And I was just talking to somebody about this today, that I was, I'm pretty active, I would say, on lots of social, but I'm pretty active on Twitter. And yesterday I was, when people come into my Twitter, oftentimes people are like, oh, I just thought I probably shouldn't be here because I don't really care about beverages, for example. And why would I listen to Kara about the beverage? And the more that I hear you talk about things, it's not just about what your knowledge is of the food and beverage industry, about, the water industry, about being an entrepreneur, but you also have curated a group of people who are curious and who are interesting. And, I had a gentleman say to me the other day that I've never really had women who, and this was on Twitter, I've never really had women who, have been around me, who have been kind of role models and who are talking and thinking about things. And I feel like the people that I follow that end up participating in your conversations are the ones that are, I wish I knew them. I wish I knew them face to face, not from really from an understanding. And so I think that the more we can interact and communicate, and whether that's, through Zoom or through social media or through, just storytelling about our brand, I think is just, it gets people to understand you and ultimately fall in love with, more things that you believe in.
That's very well said. I love that. I absolutely agree 100%. What would you say are the real key steps or the key things along the way that really contributed to growth?
So I think actually, I believe that if you really see a problem that's out there, and I always think broadly about this, it can be really in any industry, don't assume that someone else has thought about that same problem. Right? I think so often I run into people who say, oh, I've got this idea, but I'm sure, in the beverage industry, I'm sure Coca-Cola's thought about that idea. like the number of people who said that to me when I talked about my idea, you know, I had a million reasons why that I didn't believe that, but it didn't really matter. At the end of the day, I had this, like, I mean, I call it, you know, without being too, you know, foo far out, like I really believe that it was my calling to go do this, like that I really saw when I looked at a store shelf with lots of beverages on it, I did not see a beverage that I wanted to buy. And this was after, you know, as you know, I got off of Diet Coke, and I was drinking a ton of Diet Coke, and beyond Diet Coke, I was drinking water, but water was boring. So I said, I need something in between that just gives it fruit without sweeteners in it, et cetera. So I would talk to people about, you know, hey, have you ever had a water with fruit in it? And everybody would point to like vitamin water or some other flavored waters out there. And I'd always be like, yeah, but it doesn't this and it doesn't do this. And so then I just kind of tired of that conversation with people. I remember my mom always told me, like, never discuss politics at a dinner party because you'll never win, right? Like it's just it'll just make someone angry, and probably you, right? And so I thought, like, it was like the same kind of thing. I would just like walk away from these conversations and just really annoyed. But instead, what I thought is, I own the fact that I didn't really know what I was doing. And luckily I had a little bit of money that I could play with. I didn't, you know, I wasn't a billionaire, but I thought I had made a little bit of money when I was at AOL running their e-commerce. And I thought, I don't know, I can, you know, I'll view this as my MBA in beverage, creating a beverage. Right. And so I just was having, yeah. And I mean, I was curious, like I think like that's a big thing. Like, first of all, figure out, is your idea something that gets you thinking, right? And makes you want to learn more, right? And then second, like, are you more curious about this than maybe your friends, right? When you talk about this, do they think you're a little crazy, right? That you're like chatting about, you know, something, and because you look back on Sarah Blakely and, you know, others that are, you know, Richard Branson, Steve Jobs. I mean, you look back on these people, they were all considered crazy, right? About their idea, right? They had the exact same conversations that we're talking about, but they were curious about it, and they viewed it as a puzzle. And how do I ultimately solve the puzzle? So if that's you on your idea, like that's a really good thing. Then I would say that the final thing is, do you, like, can you get out of your own way? I think really what it boils down to, which I think is, I have this theory that the more educated you are, the harder it is, because you want to go and like cross all the T's, dot all the I's along the way, right? You want to be like, you're so used to being told, and not picking on like higher education, but maybe a little bit, like you're used to being told that you can't do something. And so I think that is the number one thing that you've got to say, like, okay, I'm going to go do this for, whether it's, you know, for 6 months, or I'm going to spend X amount of dollars as an investment to figure out if this idea is there. And then, you know, I said that was the last point, but I think that the next thing is just understand along the way that it's a commitment and it's a journey.